Hello, welcome back everyone. So just a quick reminder before we continue, you can post your questions in the chat or you can post them in the Ask the ShinyConf speakers channel in the Shiny for All workspace on Slack. So last but not least, we have our final speaker of the evening. I'm pleased to introduce Barrett. He's a software engineer at Posit and currently maintains a number of R and Python packages in the Shiny ecosystem. And today he will be speaking about Shinylive, a method for building serverless Shiny apps. And I have to say, this is one of those talks that I've been very excited about. And so without further ado, over to you, Barrett.
Thank you so much. Yes, as David said, my name is Barrett Schlurke. I'm at Posit and I'm on the Shiny team. And today's talk, I feel like I've been given a gift from my coworkers of George, who's keynoting, and also Winston, who's done a lot of extra work. And I'm just delivering like this awesome message because I did some work on the R side. But I'm just really excited about it because as open source developer, everything should be free. And like, this is one of those cases where like, I'm gonna give everything to you for free. And I love it. All right, so let's get into it. There's been some talks earlier today that have kind of mentioned like, hey, you could host this with Shinylive or do something like that. Let's just kind of dig into what Shinylive is. And normally when we do our Shiny development, there's the traditional Shiny deployment, like Connect owns it, or even if you have it on your local computer, but we'll just talk about it like if it's on Posit Connect and you have a centralized server that's hidden away on some cloud instance, and you have your 3 users come in and they connect to it. And R is in the server and the user has just a really thin browser that updates and sends requests back to the server, and all the computation is done on the server. As some people have mentioned, this kind of leads sometimes to having the server get overloaded with too many users or things like that. Or if you go viral on Twitter, you can't handle the massive crushing load that Twitter just gives within minutes. So instead, we can kind of do some things with Shinylive. And Shinylive takes this server where R is in the isolated server somewhere else that's not on your machine, and it moves that R instance to the person's machine into their browser. They don't have to have anything installed. They don't have to have any like packages on their machine. It's just go to the URL, wait a little bit for everything to be downloaded the first time, and then now we have a fully functioning R session. And so this kind of makes it so that that server can go away. You don't need it. You just need some place to distribute the files. It doesn't need to be an actual heavy duty, big, expensive Shiny server. So I'm going to show off a demo here. Got to give that cake nice and early in the talk. And we're going to look at the newly updated Old Faithful app that we're all familiar with if you're a Shiny user. And it's going to load here. And that took 5 seconds right now. So it's not bad, with some caching. And hey, we have a fully functioning app. And the only thing I can tell you is like, this is on my GitHub repo, which I've named my custom domain. And I promise you, I'm not paying for this because I wouldn't do it just for an Old Faithful app. So you just have to take my word at it for right now. But it's really responsive. It's all in the browser. And that is just so awesome. And it's using the latest BSLib. All right, so I will close this and go back to the slides. So this is done with a function in Shinylive called Shinylive export. I like to really think of it very similar to like how we had R Markdown render or Quarto preview or Quarto render, where you have an input folder or an input file, let's say our Shiny app in this instance, and then you export it or render it or preview it or whatever we do, we transform it, and it puts it into a HTML like folder in the end. And in this case, I'm calling it a WebR folder, but really it's just an HTML folder that contains a bunch of code that was built by WebR. Without giving away too much for George's talk, just the requirement is that the folder must be hosted to get around some browser security issues that are rightfully there. So your app must be hosted. When you call export, you will be prompted to use HTTP UV run static server, I believe, so that you can run your folder locally so you can check out your app. And then that way, if you were to put this somewhere else, you can see how that app would look like. But like one of the things that happens when you're hosting locally is you want to close your computer, you want to shut it down, you want to go home. Well, maybe now with working at home, that's a little bit different, but you want to, shut down your machine. It's not actually going to be hosting it, especially if you're going to be sharing it with coworkers or colleagues or just the world. So this is where I get really excited about it, because we can have GitHub pages and GitHub actions to automatically export and host your exported Shinylive application. So GitHub pages, it is readily available with any GitHub repository. I'm assuming you're familiar with GitHub at this point. You can turn on the website for your repository, and we can also use GitHub Actions. And it's important to note that GitHub Actions is free for the public. I think in my time with one of my repos, if it was private, I believe my yearly bill would be over $60,000. But since it's public, it's free, and I'm very thankful that they give us that affordance that anything on a public repo is free. Yeah, so we can host our static website with pages, and we can create our static website using GitHub Actions. And like, there's one thing that you'll have to do in your settings just to make sure that this is possible. So you'll have to dig into your settings pages, build and deployment source, GitHub Actions, and like check that box. Otherwise, like none of this will work because you need to opt in to having your GitHub page done with this latest and greatest bleeding edge stuff. Some speakers had talked about earlier about using like the use this package or something for like best practices. And we can use a use this call actually to download this workflow to be added into your app. And I've taken an approach with this workflow such that it's hopefully a little bit on the like hands-off approach. In my time like on the Shiny team, that we've had to manage 40 plus repos, and when you have a workflow and it updates just a little bit, you don't want to go around to your 40 different repos or your 40 different Shiny applications and make that little change to update it to the latest and greatest of something. Instead, I'm using a reusable workflow that is hosted by Shinylive, and the contract is I will take your app, I will use RN to discover any dependencies, and then I will export it with Shinylive, and then I will publish your website. And if you have this workflow in there, I promise that I don't promise, but like, the contract is that I will try to do this. And if I don't, let me know and we'll fix it and make it better for everyone else. But it makes it so you don't have to constantly update or do the latest and greatest of what's going on. Yeah, Taylor's getting ahead. If we want to look at this, we can see that I've made a few commits with this workflow being there, and you can see that I updated my slides right before presenting, and it took 2.5 minutes, and 2 minutes was to build the artifact for the website, and then the extra half minute was we take that artifact and then we upload it so that it's not like causing your repository to balloon for constant deployments. It's just kind of like take a zip folder and say, this is my website, make it there. And it works out really well. And what happens then, if we look at the live demo app, it'll show up. And we just get a little bit of loading and everything will be there right on time. And this is directly from the app.r, or whatever will be satisfy Shiny Apter. Whatever will satisfy Shiny Apter, then it'll work. So it could be an RMD, or you could be a server.r with an index.html. There's lots of different variations. Oh yes, there's a use this. I just want to mention it. It's in the slides, but there's a command that you can run to get this workflow to use this set up all your ignores and things to make it all happy. But you can get that app or that workflow within your repository. So I just want to mention that it exists. So Taylor, yeah, exactly. Usually when you do things in your app, you want to keep it secret and you want to keep that safe. And Gandalf would be actually thoroughly disappointed in that with Shinylive, there are no secrets. And this is really, really important to note, because if the whole app and R and infrastructure is being sent to the browser, then the user can poke it every which way, or someone could be standing in the middle, like man in the middle attack, or a bunch of different things. And you just need to treat it that there are no secrets. And that is it's a little sad, but also it's really nice that there's the cost benefit of having this, I'll call it freemium tier of app hosting, where as long as it's available, we can look at everything. And if that works for your use case, then by all means, absolutely leverage it. I had a friend who wanted a app to go along with his paper for doing femur infection rates as a doctor. And he wanted to be able to plug in, filter some data, and on pre-anonymized, summarized data that you can't backtrack. And then he just wanted to filter it down and say, what are the infection rates every 90, 180, and 360 days into the future? And he had that model. There's nothing there that he needs to keep secret. There's nothing that he needs to keep, hidden away. And so that's a perfect app for being done on Shinylive. And then that app will exist forever because GitHub Pages isn't going away anytime soon. So then he can give that accompanying URL for other doctors to use, moving forward. And I think that's just absolutely wonderful. Some future things before we get too far away. I want to minimize the required usage of WebR. Hopefully you haven't seen any if you've peeked into it already. And if you have, we're trying actively to get rid of that so that you don't have to install packages or things of that sort. And then also there was a 5-second startup time when any user would visit the page, even if they've had caching done. That's a lot better than the 30 seconds it used to be, even just a couple months ago. But I would love to get that down to, trivial or something that you don't even recognize. We'll be able to do this with GitHub releases and bundles, and maybe some Metacran repositories if you're a company where you have a bunch of packages that are WASM friendly. And then we might even, for the random use case, have a GitHub action that you could say, hey, make stuff for me. And then you just sit and wait, and then it'll come back with an answer after about maybe 10 minutes or so. That would be really wonderful, but we'll see. It's an exciting area that we don't really know, too many steps in advance. So again, Shinylive is another way to export your Shiny app so that you can use a serverless Shiny app. Here is the R repo. George Stagg has been doing amazing work with Shinylive assets, and he'll be presenting on that tomorrow. And I just can't thank him enough for the magic and voodoo that he does.
Hi, thank you for that, Barrett. It's good to see that the start time is in one of those future considerations, because that's been one of the limiting factors that I've seen a lot of people mention. So we have a couple of questions. Now, would it work with a Rhino if you were using the Rhino framework?
It should, and if it doesn't, like we'll move, like we want to move towards having it be possible. Let's imagine you just make your app.r, and your app.r is like, my Shiny app package run. Like that's it. Like it should be pretty interesting to work. I know there are limitations right now that, like the curl package, if any of your packages depend on curl, that function is dead in the water. And you may not be able to use that package. But as well, a lot of right now, as of today, a lot of the packages are only on Crayon. Like we can only use packages on Crayon. It'd be wonderful if we could move towards using GitHub-based packages as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that's actually one of the questions that someone asked was about curl support. So that's great. Now, is there any considerations about when you're deploying one of these ShinyLive applications sort of internally in a company? Is there anything to consider with regards to authentication or firewalls?
I will plead the fifth and not incriminate myself. But one of the chains of logic that I've heard is that if it's within a company, it could be hosted within the firewall already. So if that's the case, then you can just put up apps freely, because only users within your company would have access to it, and they should not be bad actors. So then you could just have it connect to databases and things. But again, if those connections depend on curl, or there's that little bit of leap, then that may be difficult or impossible to do.
Great. If someone wanted to decide whether they wanted to deploy their application as a ShinyLive application or just your bog standard Shiny app, what would be some factors that they would consider when they're making that decision, or whether it's even worth choosing between the two?
I like the local one, just for rapid development, and you can hit play and it runs, and you can hit in the IDE, you can just hit deploy and it's there. Like it's no problem. Right now, it kind of feels like ShinyLive is a little bit of like, you're publishing the result of what you've built, not the original file. And so I think the pro products have to catch up, and things like this GitHub Actions script is something that I'm doing to help you do it outside of the pro products that are available.
Great. Sort of an interesting question here, might be interpretable just as we finish off. Is it possible to create an app with both serverless serverless functionality and non-serverless functionality?
It is. It's the best way is actually through. I'm going to share screen one more time, if I can. Window entire screen share. It is possible. I am not going to show you the demo, but the best way is within Quarto. You can do that yourself. I didn't really want to propose that right away, because it's nice for small little toy apps, but once it gets, I'll call it serious, then it's hard to write your ShinyLive app inline. But you can put it in there. George has done some really neat things where he's able to have some data hosted by our Shiny. It's then posted to observable, because that's a hook, and then we've had WebR read from observable have WebR read from observable to plot some data. So your plotting mechanism is on browser, but your data is on server. But we're ironing out that to make it it's a smooth process, because it's quite complicated to say, make a Quarto app for your Shiny that posts it up through observable.js that then reads it in WebR Shiny app. That's not an easy statement.
Certainly not. Well, I really look forward to seeing what becomes of this, and we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today. Thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.